It's kinda hard to think about One Punch Man without thinking about My Hero Academia, or vice versa. And it's not just because they both happen to be popular and hugely successful Shonen Jump manga-inspired anime. What's particularly interesting about both of these shows is that they aren't just shows about superheroes. They both, in their own way, are shows about being a superhero. Within the worlds of both of these manga and anime series, superpowers are in some shape or form commonplace. And in both of these worlds, in only slightly different ways, the job of a superhero is a legitimate profession that you can be employed for in order to keep the peace in a chaotic world. Basically, the heroes are the police force, except cooler. But with this kind of legitimacy came a slew of moral and ideological conflicts that you may or may not expect. Ultimately, the point is both of these shows force us to think about what it really means to be a hero, and take a fresh look at what it really means to be the strongest hero and such. We still gotta wait until April for the long-awaited Season 2 of One Punch Man. My Hero Academia Season 4 is not coming until October. And a lot of you looking for more superhero anime to watch have probably already seen the anime recommended by the Mother's Basement in a similar video. To make it absolutely 100% clear, I don't really mean to say anything that's necessarily actually bad about that video or the Mother's Basement himself. I actually have a very high respect for what he does, and I highly recommend many of the videos from his channel, including the one I am building off of. I also don't necessarily have anything against One Punch Man or My Hero Academia in particular simply because they have a male lead. There can be a lot said about having a positive female supporting cast or character, which is something that My Hero Academia in particular has provided plenty of pleasant surprises with. It's just that this is not the focus of this particular video. Hero Academia videos will come sometime, just not today. Finally, to be fair, it's not even entirely the creator of this original video's fault that good or interesting anime about heroism with a female main character can be difficult to find, unless you are actively looking for them specifically. Particularly ones that get a little bit more complex than simply proving that women can be superheroes in the first place. But thankfully, and rest assured, it is far from impossible. For the record, I'm assuming most of you have already seen Madoka Magica, so that will not be on this list. In fact, I can probably bet more money on a lot of the hardcore anime fans out there having seen Madoka Magica than I can bet on y'all having actually seen Sailor Moon, which is honestly pretty sad. But on to the Rex. The first anime here is one that, despite having been one of the more popular anime in the 1990s, has since completely dissipated in interest and mentions to the point that most younger otakus might not have even heard about it. Like, its revival series literally has only 5 people rating it on Crunchyroll. Oh my god. Similar to One Punch Man, The Slayers is an action-oriented comedic satire through and through. Especially for those relatively newer to anime, this will honestly feel more like a satire of your average video game protagonist than it is about an anime main character like Saitama was, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise since the short stories that it's based on were first published in the Dragon magazine, which has been known to publish other role-playing and game-related content as well. The story follows Lena Inverse, a very powerful and clever sorceress with a sword, an attitude to end all attitudes, an awesome intro theme song, and her poor dude of a sidekick that gets tangled along with her in the giant 104 episode long misadventure. Lena isn't really heroic by nature, but that's kind of the point. If you've played video games, then you've probably taken loot from bad guys and perhaps even good civilians' houses without a second thought. It's interesting to note that the original novelist/mangaka has had an interest in shoujo manga to the extent of even writing one himself at one point, and it's also made apparent in some of the jokes within his debut story of The Slayers. It might be harder for younger anime fans to recognize, but The Slayers is also known for making fun of other anime series that were being aired around the same time. This eclectic set of punching bags for this franchise to poke at is certainly ambitious. As a straight comedy, it might not quite be my cup of tea, as someone who prefers anime with a bit more seriousness to it, but I can still see that it is very solid for what it is. If One Punch Man is the ultimate satire of anime, then the Slayers takes it another step further to become the satire of 1990s and 80s nerd culture as a whole, especially focused around the high fantasy genre. It's also really fun to see the funny and sometimes cute interactions between Lena and Guri. That's her dude sidekick, by the way. I do gotta tell you that there are a lot of girl-guy jokes here of wildly varying levels of class. But when it comes to the worst jokes, the anime is usually pretty self-aware about it, which is nice. So I personally was not bothered by much, other than the plot where Lena's magical powers got weaker during her period, which thankfully was only used in the first season. More for the intellectuals in the crowd, we have Yuki Yuna is a hero. Often described as the lighter version of Madoka Magica, except simply leaving it that would completely leave out one of the biggest and most impactful story elements that really makes this anime memorable. Yuki Yuna is a magical girl anime with a dark twist. But that's not necessarily anything new. The reason why it makes this list is because it does something of a particular concept that most hero anime, dark or not, shonen and magical girl alike, typically avoid like the plague. And Yuki Yuna is a hero runs with it to the extent that I have never seen in an anime ever before in this way. What this is won't become apparent until about halfway through the 12-episode-long anime series, which is a bit of a wait. If you still really want to go into this anime completely blind, then by all means, skip ahead to the timestamp you see on the screen right now. As for the rest of you who aren't convinced yet, stick around. The concept that this anime is all about is that of permanent personal injury, and the dilemmas you have to face when dealing with that risk inside and outside of combat. Usually in other anime, when a character gets injured, they would miraculously and often quickly recover. And the worst long-term consequences they might get would be a visible scar that doesn't really do anything other than look cool or bear some symbolism or something. But in Yuki Yuna, injuries have an actual and in some cases completely devastating effect on the character's day-to-day lives, and eventually even their ability to maintain their status as an active magical girl fighter. There are some things that the hardcore action fans gotta know before giving this show a whirl. First of all, there is action. In fact, the entire first 2 episodes is one big fight scene. The kind of battles you will see here will be flashy and over the top. But as far as strategic creativity goes, it won't compete with most action shows with one-on-one fights in between 2 skilled and intelligent fighters. Most of the time is spent fighting multiple enemies at once, and the kind of tactics and dilemmas employed are in line with that setup. So expect more teamwork than rivalry, though that's not to say that human characters never have squabbles with each other. And by the way, the chemistry between the characters is on point for this. If you liked the dysfunctional yet still somehow effective chemistry from anime like Fairy Tail, One Piece, or the Alien Invasion arc of One Punch Man, then you'll get some of that from Yuki Yuna as well. But it's the pacing that I feel like is going to throw a lot of people off. Like, you get 2 episodes of straight fighting, and then you get 2 episodes of straight slice of life and character development. From a creative literary perspective, I can kind of understand why they did this. The idea is that while the heroes are living out their daily lives, they can get a call to action without warning at any time. They can make guesstimates as to how often they might have to fight, but they can never really know for sure when the alarm on their phones are going to go off next. You can have multiple fights in 1 week, or go months without any fighting at all. And in the meantime, the heroes just have to live out their daily lives best they can. So the awkward pacing, I think, is supposed to reflect this, and get the viewer to empathize with their situation, as if it's necessary to do that even more than they already were. That being said, I can also understand how this unconventional pacing can throw a lot of viewers off who aren't expecting it. The only thing I can really say is, if you want to cry your freaking eyes out, then watching at least most of the non-fighting focused episodes will be worth the payoff. Also, possibly the biggest and most inexcusable flaw of this anime is that the ending is just way too confusing. As in, I would not even be able to explain to you what just happened if I tried, particularly with regards to the lore and epilogue aspects of it. I watched it twice. I still don't get it. If you're looking for something as tightly knit in this department as Madoka, that's not what you're going to get, unfortunately. But this anime is not compared to Madoka without good reason. It gets very emotional and very dark. as in multiple failed attempts at suicide are described in chilling detail in one episode. So you might want to make sure you're at least sitting down for that. I'll put which episode this is in the video description, if you need it. With all of that out of the way, if you're looking for something new and are okay with some extremely unconventional pacing, then head right over to Crunchyroll for a comfy 12-episode long marathon. I have yet to actually see a prequel, but there is a prequel available to be watched on Amazon, which you can watch for free if you happen to already be an Amazon Prime member. So that gives it another 12 episodes if you're interested in that. The first 2 recs on this list have so far been either all action or all emotion. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more in between, albeit also very experimental in nature, then my third recommendation is Little Witch Academia, which, yes, is arguably pretty meta. And it absolutely is, at least among hardcore Studio Trigger fans, technical animation sakuga, and Netflix enthusiasts, none of which have regularly done justice to the show's narrative content, in criticism or in the large amount of praise it has indeed earned in my book. It is for that reason I am including this anime particularly for those of you who are not within any of those before mentioned groups, and were drawn to My Hero Academia because of Deku's struggles in overcoming adversity, and unfortunate circumstances regarding his birth, including but not limited to bullying, sociopolitics, and being otherwise, disadvantaged. Besides the superficial similarities in the title, the motivation of the main character, Ako Kagure, is comically similar to Deku's, despite the fact that the basic concept for Witch Academia's story was published in 2013 as its first short film, while My Hero Academia was published a year later in 2014. However, unlike Deku, it does take longer for Ako's efforts to improve herself to amount to a satisfying result. Little Witch Academia is relatively more down-to-earth by being much more firmly grounded in middle school, high school classroom kid culture than its Shonen Jump lookalike. Despite the fact that none of Ako's bullies are technically anywhere near as bad as Bakugo, how realistic and typical Ako's confrontations are honestly made the bullying aspect much more impactful and harder to watch than any of Bakugo's antics. Of course, whether you see that as a good thing or not is up to you. While the rivalry between Deku and Bakugo is essentially the power fantasy of being able to overcome and one-up your bullies, again, not that there's anything wrong with that, in fact I love it, but the very different take that Little Witch presents is one where there really isn't much Ako can do about it. And many of her attempts to one-up her bullies only end up making the situation worse. It's a story that teaches perseverance more so than anything else. Ako's goal is to become a kind of witch that makes people smile by performing magic for many people like her idol, Shiny Chariot. So this anime is more so about the idolization kind of heroism than it is about the fighting crime superhero kind of heroism. Though along the way to becoming a performer, and learning to just use any kind of magic in the first place, Ako also ends up on a journey to solve a puzzle left unsolved by Shiny Chariot herself. Because apparently performing magic for kids isn't enough to do in life. Oh yeah, and then Ako somehow ends up saving 2 countries from going to nuclear war with each other in the process. So it's obviously not that these witches never have to fight anything, it's just that you won't get a good fight scene every episode because, frankly, it's not even always necessary for most of the early subplots of the show. Even some of the more interesting action sequences don't even really qualify as a fight per se. But when they finally do get some of the adults in on the main plot, I have not fangirled so much over a completely serious, epic and hype, non-comical girl versus girl fight scene since Princess Mononoke versus Miss Kobayashi from, well, the movie Princess Mononoke. Anyways, overall it's much more of an adventure drama school life anime with a few really epic action sequences here and there. The entire first season of the anime might not be as plot driven as the second, but thankfully it's not a complete drag either if you have a little patience, and especially if you are looking for some originality, some great world building, and an introduction to how shockingly contemporary this show's social and political themes are going to turn out to be. Some of the early Season 1 episodes would even be among the most memorable anime episodes in terms of how fresh and unique they are, as in across all anime I've seen lately. One of which you could literally just watch without knowing anything about the rest of the anime at all. But most of the others are best watched as part of the series, such as the weirdness that is the Mushroom Girls episode, I guess. To get nitpicky, Akko's character itself can be understandably very off-putting for some viewers. This is primarily because she holds the personality type of an archetypical gung-ho, we-can-do-it kind of bone-headed shonen protagonist with a lot of bark. However, unlike the shonen heroes who normally hold this personality, she does not have a lot of bite to go along with it. This aspect of the anime can be appreciated in a few honestly brilliant moments of meta-commentary regarding the before-mentioned personality trope and the plot cliches that usually accompany those characters. However, as intellectually interesting this might be, writing actually entertaining plots around this unusual personality known as Akko was a clear challenge. But it's also an unusual personality skill set combination that the show does thankfully get much better at working with as time goes on. Primarily by doing things that are equally as off the wall as Akko herself is. But of course it also helps that she becomes creative with what little magic she can eventually learn as well. Which, by the way, is a real treat to witness in and of itself. Season 2 is overall pretty awesome. The anime as it is now ends on a pleasantly high note and can be viewed on Netflix. Like we've implied before, it's a Netflix anime, so if you got it, by all means go for it. Moving on, if you're looking for a never zany comedy with a lot of heart, a unique premise, a little bit of action thrown in, and some more themes similar to My Hero Academia, and if at any point you had wished My Hero Academia would go into more depth with regards to Deku's journey to basically create a new identity and make new friends at his new school, then the show for you is none other than Shugo Chara. What is, in my opinion, the most underrated magical girl series from the last decade, originally released in 2009. The basic concept is that Hinamori Amu is a 5th grade elementary school student who pretends to be cool and tough, or as they say in the actual show, cool and spicy, I guess, when really she doesn't feel that way on the inside at all, and is generally unhappy with how distant she is from her peers, and with how she feels like she can't be her true self around others. So she makes a wish, and bam, she is a magical girl. Well, to say that she is a magical girl is to use the term loosely. What happens is that she gains guardian characters who represent a kind of person whom she wishes to be. They are basically goofy little fairy-like people whom only she and other character bearers can see and talk to. Amu can call upon the help of one of her guardian characters in order to take on a different personality, which can be useful in the show's usually very brief physical encounters, but also they can be used for slice-of-life events, which is just one of the things that make this show truly unique as far as magical girl shows go. For example, one of her guardian characters can give her the ability to be very good at art. So needless to say, with that detail, you are going to need at least a little bit of tolerance for normal and general life stuff in order to get through this anime. But so long as you got that, you should be good to go, because the balance is pretty well done here. Despite being very comedic, this anime never sacrifices continuity or the legitimacy of the dramatic aspects in order to be so. It completely relies on the goofiness of the characters and the scenario itself in order to make you laugh when you should. The carefree attitudes of Amu's fellow character bearers, aka the other magical girls and boys who are not very good at using their own powers, so they make Amu do most of the work, should be particularly appealing to fans of One Punch Man, what with their ironically unheroic motivations and such. But that's alright for dramatic aspects too, because Amu is the real hero here. It's far from being all fun and games, since Shugo Chara tends to tackle serious subject matter and genuine personal struggles, all somehow without breaking the overall feel of the show. You can't necessarily say it ever turns dark, in the same sense that some of the more famous, quote, dark magical girls shows do, like Madoka or even Yuki Yuna, but you definitely can't say it's all sunshine and kids' balloons either. The overarching villain plot is a slow burn, but make no mistake, consistently so. As in, there is surprisingly little filler. What's really funny is that the episodes that look like they would be filler if they were from any other anime are usually the ones that are absolutely not filler. Just trust me, they aren't. At least not until season 2, but we'll get back to that. It's a slow burn plot. Some people like that. Some people don't. Based on a completed manga series by Peach Pit, a woman mangaka duo, at its heart, it's a story about the formation of one's identity. A self-discovery story, if you will. Right along with the recurring theme surrounding the pursuing of one's dreams and goals. There are a few times when it feels like a really complicated life situation was solved in an overly simplistic manner, but most of it does come back to plague Amu's stubborn mind later as the show goes on. Repeatedly, in fact. Of course, few things in life can be perfect. I must admit that I particularly found episodes focusing on Amu's miscellaneous minor character classmates far more interesting than most of the ones focusing on other Guardian character bearers, especially early on in the series. I also can't help but feel like Amu learning to do some things without the help of her Guardian characters was procrastinated on a bit more than it should have. They do address it, just not consistently. Until episode 20-ish or something, I forget where, which is unfortunate. Other than those few things, the rest of the show is pretty awesome. And the first season alone is over 50 episodes long, so you got yourself a heck of a binge watching for if you like it. I'm also putting in a heads up that there are a few non-consensual and dubiously consensual PG-13 actions taken on occasion by both guys and girls at different points in the show. There is another warning related to the child-friendliness of this show that I'm going to put into video description. To wrap up Shugo Chara, it may also initially seem strange for most of Amu's Guardian characters to be much girlier than her default self that she wishes to change. But when you are to actually witness the story unfold before you, I promise it's not nearly as bad as it may initially seem. Overall, in almost every way, it's a great ride to see Amu grow up into a complex and multifaceted character, and to eventually see her come to terms with that very fact. You can watch it on Crunchyroll, or the Crunchyroll's VRV service if you are a premium member. There are English subs, but unfortunately an official dubbed version in any language does not exist. RIP to sight-impaired people like my poor mom. The main plot ends at the end of Season 2. Season 2 is not as good as the first scene, mainly just because there's apparently filler all of a sudden, but most of the hate I hear is about Season 3. The internet does not talk about Season 3. Practically all of the halfway coherent negative reviews of this anime as a whole are because of Season 3. And entirely because of Season 3. Yikes. So just watch the first 2 seasons. For the last, but most certainly not least, is one that's a much more dramatic and solemn anime, along the veins of One Punch Man in that it's about a certain take on the downsides of being overpowered, or exceptionally talented. The thing is, this anime takes the concept into a very different direction than how it happened with Saitama in One Punch Man. The entire Nanoha series is phenomenal in so many ways, from the very beginning all the way through the extra long 26-episode Nanoha Strikers season. It's a series that follows Nanoha from her elementary school years at her cute little family restaurant with a coincidentally familiar name, and then through her accelerated and sudden advancement into a career involving galactic law enforcement with the help of her apparently phenomenal talent for magical combat. Yep, it's a magical girl anime that follows the protagonist into adulthood and beyond. You don't see that every day. Another notable thing is that while it is a very serious anime, it also still has a very healthy helping of the optimism and the happy endings which made pre-Madoka era magical girl anime, as well as most traditional shonen anime famous to begin with. Essentially, you get the best of both worlds with regard to darkness and light. You get just a little bit more on the heavier side compared to Shugo Chara. The action is top-notch in this high firepower magical girl anime, and is what this anime is best known for. There's also some very gradual yet perfectly effective world building that continues well into the 3rd season. But what really carries the show is the character development and the characters themselves. Strangely, the point in the anime that most other people seem to have thought was the slowest point of the series, which is the early part of the 1st season, is actually a part that I personally found most fascinating, and for reasons I'm about to explain, actually secured its place on this list. So Nanoha might not be overpowered in that she can beat anything with one punch, but right from the get-go it's made subtly yet intelligently obvious that she is very gifted and also very privileged in many ways. Most notably is among the first things we learn about Nanoha is that her family owns a small restaurant, And while Nanoha may not be as rich as one of her friends, she does nonetheless have both the family funds and the self-discipline to attend a cram school outside of the primary entrance exam study periods, which usually occurs during middle school or high school, not elementary. The third thing that becomes obvious is that Nanoha is humble to a fault, to the point where her friends even chastise her for it. Fourth, her intellect. Most notably, how she can think well under pressure. For example, she is able to accurately solve a math problem in literally 1.5 seconds, upon being suddenly called upon in class when she was not even paying attention to the lecture. OP, please nerf. It's this character who willingly chooses to become a magical girl and take on all of the responsibilities that come with it. Hence, we enter the early part of the first season. As just the first of many great arcs, her modesty shown earlier shows its true colors, as a phenomenon that many successful people, especially young successful people, do experience in real life. Despite her progress in reaching her goal, despite how she literally taught alien magical spells to herself that her alien mentor could not even do, and she did that within the time span of a week, in the evenings after cram school no less, but she makes one mistake, and it's not enough. She thinks of herself as a terrible mage, and she pushes herself harder. The anime is not up in your face about any of this either, as the philosophy of show don't tell is utilized extremely well. These themes eventually, after quite a while, do resurface in one of the most emotionally intelligent arcs in the anime. Unlike Saitama, where he's all angsty about how easy his fights are, the Nanoha series takes a real and common struggle people deal with every day, and depicts it in a powerful, relatable, and consumable way. Both approaches are valid, but if you want the latter thing, give the Nanoha series a try. While we are on the topic of the notable realism in the anime, and also a warning, child abuse. Not only is child abuse depicted at one point in the anime, but it's psychologically accurate child abuse, where the kid rationalizes their abusive parents' actions and everything. I'm telling you, this crap is deep. Be prepared for it. Not everything is realistic, though, like the prevalence of little kids being employed for magic work, albeit there is usually an exceptional story as to why behind it. It's not portrayed as a big deal in of itself either. One, for example, is the son of a commander who was practically bred for this, probably. So of course he'll be one of the exceptions. Speaking of which, another detail I like is how the Nanoha series has a strong male supporting cast without ever letting them completely steal the spotlight away from our protagonist, which is also something I liked about the Shugo Chara series as well. The comedy in this show is admittedly pretty sparse, but what little there is felt like it was just enough and perfectly timed. They somehow made realistic elements engaging, and they balanced Nanoha's power by constantly putting her in ridiculously difficult situations that no 9-year-old, no matter how talented, could be expected to deal with in one breath. Also, when she becomes an adult, her greatest enemy becomes this thing called bureaucracy. In other words, politics. There is just always some higher power, or someone out there who's stronger than her, or that gets the jump on her and her friends and crew. Somebody to keep her in check and on her toes, no matter how skilled or powerful she gets. And that's what really makes this entire anime work. As far as anything legitimately bad I have to say about this anime, I don't really have much other than, well, I guess I gotta talk about the fan service. So I think there are exactly a total of 4 panty shots of Nanoha, a 9-year-old girl at the time in season 1. Which is pretty messed up considering her age. Honestly, the ones in the first episode I didn't really notice much, but the 2 later in the first season are obviously forced and obviously tacky, and yeah, that's definitely messed up. Not gonna lie. When it comes to magical girl transformation sequences, I usually have a fairly relaxed policy considering that they were popularized as a symbol of girls reclaiming their sexual agency and liberation in titles like Sailor Moon. Yet, I'd say I have mixed opinions on exceptionally detailed transformation sequences of the Nanoha series. Detail as in the way the actual sequence is animated. The models themselves technically only show a Barbie doll's level of detail, but still. It's particularly creepy when the characters are only 9 years old. If it were not for this show seriously cleaning up its act for season 3, I probably would have been extremely hesitant to include it in this video. Transformations don't happen often in Nanoha, but they do happen. Approximately once every 12-ish episodes or so, because sometimes they are shortened to just a flash of light. Transformations and those few awkward panty shots aside, there actually is not much else in terms of the amount of fan service, especially after season 2. I'd say about 90% of the rest of the fan service in season 1 is concentrated in that one bathhouse episode. And you know, if we're gonna be real for a minute, the impression I got from the bathhouse episode is that it was halfway through the first season and the anime just kinda remembered that it's supposed to be an anime spin-off for a erotic visual novel, and was like, crap, hold everything, when did more boobies? And then the fact that it's supposed to be a sexy novel spin-off was slowly forgotten about yet again, it seems like. There are a few myths that I want to divine buster away right here and now. First of all, for the love of all things magical and cute, the magical girl Lyrical Nanoha, even if that might have been the original intention, at the end of the day is not exclusively for men. I mean, most of y'all weren't even talking about the sexual elements when you were talking about how it was exclusively for men. No, y'all were being like, the action is good. And sometimes people talk about how it's too dark for little girls. And to that I have to say, y'all know adult women exist, right? Secondly, I have research to prove my point that women watch Nanoha in surprisingly large numbers, even by the most modest estimates. And who knows, that might have been the reason why the fan service outside of transformation sequences got toned down in later seasons. And or also why the Lolicon fan service practically vanished by the time of the Strikers season, where the youngest girl here got one of the classiest and conservative transformation sequences in the entire show. I'd even go so far as to say it's one of the most conservative magical girl transformation sequences in the entire genre. In 2016, Carapedia, a Japanese magazine, conducted a 10,000 reader poll for which magical girl is their favorite as a character. Over half of those polled were in their teens and 20s. Of the female voters specifically, not one but 2 different characters from the Nanoha series made it in the top 10. Nanoha herself sits at number 6 with 139 votes. Now separately, Fate Testarossa from the Nanoha series got 116 votes. Combined, that's 255 votes. Now this might not seem very significant at first, but let's really think about what this means. First of all, the point of the poll is that you are voting for the best magical girl. Nanoha has some tough competition, like Sailor Moon, who obviously got a few token votes purely because of her legacy, Amy, who turned out to be the favorite from the Sailor Moon franchise, raking in 117 votes, Madoka characters, Fate characters, this girl, literally any kick-ass pre-Cur Glitter Force character, characters from old-time classics like Magica Do-Re-Mi, a younger audience anime from the late 1990s that some of the teenage voters probably had nostalgia points for, and like the protagonist of the classic manga Cardcaptor Sakura written by Clamp, one of the most well-known and prolific of any all-female mangaka groups, and yet many ladies, at least 255, still cast their vote for a Nanoha series character. Sakura, from the continuing classic Cardcaptor Sakura, came in first place with 298 votes. Not only did 255 voters watch Nanoha, and not only did they enjoy Nanoha, but they thought either Nanoha or Fate was better than Amy, better than Sailor Moon, and even better than Sakura, the reigning queen of magical girls herself. Basically, the most important takeaway is that this number is the bare minimum of Nanoha fans we have in this poll. Who's to say how many people loved watching the Nanoha anime but still went with Sakura, or literally any other magical girl instead for this particular poll when it came down to it? Clearly, the myth that women don't watch action, dark, and serious shows is exactly the myth that it is. A myth. The fact that what was supposed to be an erotic romance visual novel spin-off ended up gaining a large enough female audience for such a drastic change within the anime itself to occur proves this yet again in one of the most dramatic ways yet. Albeit not perfectly, as imperfect as it is, it still cannot be ignored that this is one of the very few anime I know of to tackle themes in the Strikers season, such as a lower-ranking female commander's desire to climb the ranks in her job so that she does not have to submit to another authority as soon as another commander makes a scene. And with that, the only legal way to watch this series at the moment I know of is to buy the DVDs off of Amazon or eBay. I will leave the links in the video description. It's always had a rocky licensing life for streaming. Funimation had it for a while before they dropped it. Then Amazon Prime took it, which is where it was when I started making this video. Such is life, but oh well. I will let you know when it gets back up for legal streaming. The order you should watch it is Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha, Nanoha A's with a comma, and then Nanoha Strikers. In 2016, they adopted a Nanoha series spin-off manga where one of the side characters just so happens to be Nanoha's kid. But I gotta warn you that according to some of the reviews I've read, some of the weirder parts of the fan service came back for that series, so just a heads up. The original series through Strikers does encompass a full beginning-to-end story, so you won't be left on a cliffhanger if you stop at the end of Strikers. As always, there's also a bibliography with all of my research sources and such in the video description, and also in a pinned comment. If y'all want to see another similar video focusing on even more recommendations for heroine anime in the future, or especially perhaps even a list dedicated to more recommendations for shoujo anime or manga beyond just Shugo Chara, then please leave a comment, let me know, hit that like button, and be sure to hit the bell button after you subscribe so you are notified when I make new videos. You can also follow me on Twitter for updates and additional content. Consider contributing to my Patreon. Thanks for watching, and that's all for now.